Bob Price, along with Andy, and we're back again in the Johnny Appleseed ovens, if you will. But this is where it all begins, really, back here, right?
Right. Yep. Exactly. 90% of our stuff still comes from right here in Casper, and it all starts life here in these greenhouses on Zero Road.
How long have you been doing this, by the way?
My whole life.
Yeah.
I've been managing for about 10 years, but I've been in it my whole life.
Yeah. And your dad, of course, starting the whole process, right?
He did, yep, almost 40 years ago.
Yeah. What is his intro? How did he start?
I don't know how they got started. He worked for the railroad, and then they decided, my uncle had his degree in horticulture, and they just started doing this, and next thing you know, they were selling plants out of Gibson's parking lot, and then we grew into these facilities.
Well, for years, people have been using Johnny Appleseed. Today, again, we're back in this marvelous big greenhouse. Andy's going to show us a little bit about how to trim some roses, right?
Right, yeah.
And these are, first off, tell us what we have in front of us.
What we have is two different types of roses. The two main types would be hybrid tea roses, which have one bloom per stem that you can see. And then Floribunda or grandiflora roses have multi-blooms per stem. You can see that they've got about 4 blooms on this stem, up to almost 10 on this stem.
What's the most popular? Is there one that's more popular? Or it just depends upon what you want.
The hybrid tea is more popular. This would be your traditional rose with the big head, like what you'd get on Valentine's Day, where these would be more of a landscape rose. Still very pretty in their own right, but they don't have the big show that the hybrid tea does.
Well, we've always heard, Andy, that the rose is very fastidious. You got to be really, really careful with what you do. Is that true or not?
They're not as hard as people think. They do have some things that make them a little bit more difficult than the other flowers, but all in all, they're not too difficult at all. But one of the most frequent questions I get is, how do I trim my roses back after they're spent? The biggest mistake a person can do is not trim their roses after they've spent their blooms, because right here at the base of the flower, you can see this little area.
Right.
The ovaries are in there, and once the flower is spent, that'll turn into rose hips. I think people use them for different teas and things like that. Yeah. But at any rate, if you leave the rose hips attached to the stem, the rose figures its work for the year is done, and it just kind of goes into a dormant, non-blooming stage. Whereas if we go like on this stem, and we count down, you see that this group has 3 leaves, and this group has 3 leaves, and then this group has 5 leaves. We always say cut them back at the first group of 5 leaves. And by cutting this off, you remove the rose hips, and that'll stimulate the plant. The plant will forget that it's bloomed, and it'll bloom again for you. Whereas if you leave these on, you only get 1, maybe 2 blooms a year.
I see.
By taking them off, you can keep this plant blooming all through the summer.
And it will bloom all summer long.
It will, yep.
Now give us that again. You took it back to the 5. You found the leaf where they had the first 5 little leaves on it.
Yep, the first set of 5. And so you just count them here. You have 2, 4, 5, and then on these first 2, it's only 3.
Okay.
And on different roses, it'll vary.
I see. Okay.
So like on these particular ones, this one here, if these were spent blooms, I hate to be taking off the fresh blooms, but that's what we have to work with this time of year. So here again, you can see you have multi-blooms, but the same concept still holds true. You've got a set of 3, a set of 3, and then a set of 5 starting here. But if you notice, you have 2 stems coming off instead of 1, and so you want to get just below that. And so, again, we've taken off the first set of 5, and it takes care of all the blooms that we've got. And then that way we're not leaving a rose hip behind that'll cause the plant not to want to bloom again. As you go through cutting, you want to make sure that you cut each one. I'll cut them a little bit faster now.
That's all right.
Again, I'm cutting just below the first set of 5 on all of these.
Okay.
I want to make sure that I get every tip. And then that will stimulate, just like on our container garden, when we did that, we trimmed back the flowers as we were planting them, even though it made them look bad when we first planted them. Same thing with the rose. Every stem that we have will become 2 stems now that we've cut it. And so it stimulates a more vigorous plant and a better growth habit by trimming it, in addition to getting it to bloom again.
So by how many blooms would you expect in the summer?
Oh, I think it would be, I think it's reasonable to expect 4 bloom cycles through the summer. Yeah. So I think that given the proper timing of cutting, a person could have roses all summer long, clear through into the end of August. As you can see, I'm taking off all these that I can. On the Floribunda, it's a lot more difficult just because there's so much more blooms that it can make it harder to get them all removed. But if you find some the next day or in a couple of days that still need to come off, go ahead and take them off. Yep. And also, if you have some that finish before the others, it's okay to trim part of the plant and then leave the rest of it.
Well, there you have it. Trimming roses.